Because it seems like we've adapted this misbelief that your core is the front of the abs, right? Like it doesn't matter what gym I've ever visited, how many different sports I've trained in, people think core is their abs. And they're not wrong entirely, but it's a big common misconception. If you talk to a lot of high-level strength and conditioning coaches, athletes, they can easily make the argument that your core and everything that braces that core could start as early as right above the kneecap and end up by your clavicle, because all of this entails stability. When you have somebody working on, let's use a plank for example. You got an athlete working on a plank, and there's nothing wrong with planks, they have their place. But athletes get in this motion of this static movement of just holding a position, and then when it comes time to turn it into a dynamic, they can no longer stabilize that core. With a lot of the athletes that I train, they have a lot of dynamic movements in the sport that they do, in their training, so they can have a nice significant carryover into the full incorporation of their overall training. Anytime I have an athlete that has a weak core, I like to do cradle carries. Cradle carries can also be called sandbag carries. An actual cradle carry, you know, when the man was holding the wife, carrying them under the threshold and all that old day stuff. But I love to program cradle carries. We don't do them with a sandbag in our gym just because anybody that's ever done these with sandbags, they'll tell you it causes a mess. So we do it with D-balls. Now it can be done with Atlas stones. Any odd object you can hold in front of you can be done for a cradle carry. I like to do these because it incorporates the full core. Not only that, it helps you learn about breathing stabilization. It also helps you show that any imbalances in that core, this exercise will be exponentially worse on the athlete. And it is overall great capacity conditioning to tie into somebody's program. You know, two birds, one stone. With a wall ball. So earlier I talked about the lower we hold it, the harder it is. Because if I'm here, I'm gonna be holding it and pulling it into my diaphragm, and this is gonna restrict my breathing as I try to walk with this, okay? Now, I tell people to get this high, but when a lot of people I tell them to get it high, they'll do a gable grip here and press it into their lungs. Now, I could get away with this with something light, but the heavier it is, pressing into my lungs, the more restricted my breathing is, okay? So what I have my athletes do is create a shelf, okay? Because remember, we're doing this for a core conditioning exercise. Is we're gonna create a shelf where my elbows are high and up top. Everything's parallel with the ground as possible. My chin is resting on the ball, okay? From here, I'm gonna remain as upright as possible as I walk. This keeps it off my lungs, this keeps it off my diaphragm, so that I can continue to breathe as I walk with this. So we're gonna move this one down a little bit. I'm not gonna do too much. Clearly I don't have any soccer skills to move a damn ball. So we have the 100-pound D-ball here. We'll have athletes pick it up. See how it's resting on my chin? I will literally just walk, not run. Make sure I don't trip over nothing. I'll have athletes circle at a distance, keeping their arms nice and tall. And do not drop the ball until after you cross the line from wherever our start position was. But if you notice, the higher you get that, guys, the easier it is to breathe. Try this with a heavier object. Practice it with a lighter object, just like you do any of our other trainings. About the cradle carry. Now, this is the things that we'll touch on the most, is that the lower you hold the cradle carry, the more difficult it's gonna be. I like to get my arms as high and outside as I possibly can so the weight's not setting directly onto my chest, crushing into my diaphragm, restricting my breathing. The better you can do that, the further you're gonna go, the heavier the weight you can use, the better your overall results from the training will be. Distance-wise, now when you're programming this, I will usually start an athlete off around 20 to 30 feet, depending on the individual athlete. From there, we'll build in distance, and then we'll build in weight. What we'll do is we do round trips with this. I'll mark something that they go down in circle and come back. There have been times I've done these in circuits to where the athlete will travel all the way down, do another exercise. Let's say it's 20 calories on a bike, they'll hop back off the bike, carry it down, do another exercise, do the cradle carry back. Phenomenal exercises. I usually program these once to twice a week. If I don't program them twice a week, the other capacity conditioning I'll program in with these on alternate days is farmer carries. Because mainly the most athletes I deal with are jiu-jitsu or the MMA variety athletes, and I like to work on capacity conditioning that I consider relevant to their overall training capacity. All right, guys, so that's how I like to do the cradle carries, how we program them, why we program them, and how they can be adapted into your program overall. If you have any questions or comments about this exercise, go ahead and leave them below. I do try to answer as many of those as I possibly can. Make sure you check out averagejoestrength.com for any of your tailored programming needs. And as always, guys, see you in the gym.